You're listening to Autodesk's Digital Builder Podcast, a show that inspires construction professionals to innovate and use technology to improve how they build our world. I'm Eric Thomas, and I've been working in construction for nearly a decade. And now I have the privilege to sit down with industry trailblazers to hear how they're solving construction's biggest challenges and redefining the future of the built environment. Welcome to Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I am your host, Eric Thomas. We are at Autodesk University. If you're watching on YouTube, you probably figured that out by now. If you're listening, then now you know. But today we are going to be having a really awesome conversation about community. And I am joined by three amazing folks to dig into just that. It is Autodesk University 2024, and we are in San Diego this year. This is the first episode that we're recording this week. To tell today's story, I am joined by Michaela Alexander, the Senior Manager of Global Customer Advocacy at Autodesk. Michaela, that is a mouthful. Laurie Yaneff, the BIM Technician at Stone Group Architects, and Stephen Bloomer, who's a BIM Lead at GHD. I didn't tell you guys I'm going to ask this next question, which makes this so much more interesting. I am compiling a digital builder playlist.
Okay.
And so I want to know, what song can't you get enough of right now? What are you listening to right now? What's in your playlist?
To pump me up today, it would have been Eye of the Tiger.
Eye of the Tiger. I like it.
Classic, but
Get that exciting jams. You go, why have I subjected myself to this? And now here we are. Laurie, what's hot for you right now? What are you listening to?
Probably not hot now, but my good old go-to would be What's My Age Again from Blink-182.
Nice. I recently was listening to Blink-182. I pulled an album out. I was like, I've listened to this in like 15 years.
Yeah.
And then I felt old as dirt, and that felt terrible, but that's okay. So we're having fun. So Michaela, I've got the first question for you again today.
All right.
We're all about community. Your title has community in it, so that seems like you might be a good person to answer this question. How are we defining community today? What comes to mind, and what shows up in your world in that regard?
As someone who's been helping to build communities for the last 12 years in my career, I think one of the things I think about is how to create authentic spaces. We often go to classes and conferences and different places where we represent our companies, but where's the rest of us? How do we be our whole selves? So I think about communities as places where people can share the rest of them, right? We have things like behind the build, and it's kind of going beyond the build. Who's that person, and who are the people behind it all? So I think that's what I think about when I think about creating communities, is seeing the whole person.
I love that. And there's so much to be said about what you can learn from the communities, the bonding and, shared pains and shared challenge and shared wins. And, just getting to know all these folks who are in the same industries and doing many of the same things, or oftentimes not too, because one of the cool things about being at AU is there are a lot of industries here, and there's a lot of things you can learn from your friends who are in manufacturing or, in the digital and media entertainment side. So Stephen, Laurie, I'm curious, what communities are both of you part of? And Laurie, I'd love if you could take this first. Just give me a sense of where are you spending your time when you're not, sitting next to me on a stage?
I live in kind of a smaller local region, and so the in-person, I wasn't able to find much there, and I think I somehow do connect just with my technical background easier on a computer. So most of it is a digital community, and one of those is the big Autodesk Big Room. Sometimes the forums are community on Autodesk. I've recently just been getting into, though, using LinkedIn more as a community. I always used to think of that as like just a job platform, but now I'm finding people are putting like their real selves out there. It's interesting to see geography isn't as much of a limiting factor anymore, that you can build a community even if you don't see somebody every day or maybe even ever, but you can still connect on some commonality and build a community and make it your own wherever in the world you are.
I love that. And I'm a remote employee these days. And so online communities for me are incredibly important to just staying sane, whether it's my immediate peers and colleagues and the way that we connect or various forms. Like I'm all over LinkedIn as well these days, partly just because of the nature of my job, but two, because it's great to just connect to folks and see what they're up to and, stay involved in, industry trends and everything else. Stephen, I'm interested to hear, what communities are you tied to? What are you part of?
As we mentioned before, there's probably, I guess, two kinds of communities. You mentioned the virtual and the in-person. I live in Australia, down under, and we have quite a few in-person activities. So the virtual, not just the virtual ones, In terms of virtual side, the three major would be the big room, the research community, and the feedback community. So those are my big three ones. All have different value to me personally. So some of the research community, I feel like and the feedback as well, I feel like you're really giving back to the product, whilst to the big room, you're working with each other, you're sharing knowledge and sharing between yourselves. It's actually pretty exciting. So yeah.
There's so much to be said, and I've had time to spend some time in the big room as well. I think you might have seen my face floating around in there a little bit on occasion, which is an interesting thing, but I appreciate being able to participate. Michaela, anything from your side to add as far as just the community participation? I mean, obviously, you were on the other side of the big room than our friends sitting to my immediate right.
Yeah, I think what's so cool about sometimes sitting on the other side and speaking with our community manager, Alex Eckhart, and thinking about like, what does it mean to create the environments that help you guys feel safe to connect with each other? And what's the balance between things that are fun in community, right? And lighthearted, but that bring people together, like acronym challenges. And sometimes it's like, yeah, that might be not the most educational part of your day, but it's something that helps you connect with others and be like, gosh, that person really understands, or that was a really funny acronym that isn't the thing it is, but totally makes sense because of the industry I'm in. I think it's exciting for us to see like where people connect. I also think that it's awesome to see people share their knowledge, and like Laurie and Steven are such great examples of people who give back to community on a daily basis. And like Laurie was saying, like, being able to connect in the digital space, you can help anyone, right? Someone throws out a question and someone else can be like, oh, I dealt with that last week when I was working in the tool, or with my colleague that was difficult. And it gives you the space to connect with each other. And that's what's really fun to see happen.
I appreciate that perspective too. It's cool having, folks from both sides of the thing. And I just am thankful, as I mentioned, that digital community, especially coming out of the weird 4 years we had where, everything was strange with the pandemic. I moved to a new place, and it's harder as you get older to build that community. And I've been grateful for being able to lean on my, digital friends and communities, regardless if that's tied to work or, personal stuff or, whatever else. So it all kind of comes together. But, we are sitting at Autodesk University, so I feel like we'd be a little remiss to not mention and talk about that a little bit. So I'm curious, tell me a bit more about the community tied to AU specifically. Like what gets you coming back every year? What are you fired up about? Laurie, could you kick us off for this one?
Funny enough, like I met a group of other women at AU 2 years ago and connected with them probably maybe on the second day. And then we intentionally planned getting together at AU last year. And this year I'm rooming with one of them. And so they just call me I'm adopted into their group now. And so it's been great, especially talking geography. You come to AU and there are people from around the world, which it blows my mind. But then you sit down and it doesn't matter where you've just come from. You can sit down and it may be an issue, but it also might just be an inside joke that you guys get of something about the software, something funny. And that's kind of the great thing about the big room too, is that funny stuff that transcends wherever you are or what discipline you're in. There's some of that just inside nerd joke stuff that it really builds that connection. And that's where then you build that community of, I just had a great laugh with this person. Next time I'm going to watch what they're saying and just go from there.
I love that. And in the way we build changes sometimes based on geo, but I think that core just vibe, for lack of a better descriptor, is consistent throughout the regions. I've had the privilege of working in the Middle East. I lived in Dubai for a long time, and just the narrative was always very similar. And when the BS kind of spins up, it's easy to step back and have a good chuckle about it. Steven, how about you? How does your time at AU spin up? I know you've been here a number of years at this point now.
So this is my 7th year.
You've been to more AUs than I have, my friend.
It's such an awesome event. I just like catching up with people that you may have seen a few years ago, and just you bump into them in the corridor. Even though there's 12,000 plus people here, you seem to always bump into the same people. After this, at 2:00, I'm really excited that we've got the Big Room community catch up. That's going to be something I'm really looking forward to at this AU. It's actually see people in person that you've been seeing their face or the little icon for so long on the Big Room. Actually see them in person, have a conversation. Yeah, That's my most exciting part.
The interesting thing for me when I've met people digitally, and if you're someone that I've met and I had an awkward moment where you walked up and said hello and I gave you a blank stare, I struggle so much to translate Zoom introductions to a real human standing in front of me. And so it's always interesting and a real privilege to sit down and chat with people and be like, hey, okay, we've talked a whole bunch in the last couple of years and we built this bond and now you're a real person standing in front of me. Like you exist. You're not just this avatar or this, digital persona. So I appreciate that too. Michaela, you and I both have been to a number of AUs at this point.
Yeah.
How do you think about that from your side of the fence?
My whole career has been in in-person events. When I get to something like AU, I get so excited about the energy and that connection point. I think that digital environments are so important and such an incredibly powerful way to connect us, but there's nothing more fun than getting to see people in real life, to meet with them, to share knowledge in real time, to be able to go to dinner with people and then pick up the conversation the next day. It's just something that we don't often get to do. And also in our day-to-day lives, especially for those of us who work remote, some days it's like we're balancing, work and then life and then kids and then getting away, and I think to be able to have 3 focused days to come together and really nerd out on industry topics is something that's just really invigorating, I think, for all of us.
Well, and
It's
I found too,
chaos.
a lot of chaos. When you meet those connections and build that community at AU, that connection doesn't stop just when you fly back home. Like that group of girls, or there's lots of people where I scan their badge and then I find them on LinkedIn and I keep track of them that way, or find other digital ways to keep in contact no matter what time zone or where we are around the world. But it's you make that contact and there's a spark, there's something there, and then you build on it.
So I want to help those out there listening find some of these communities. And so I'm curious how each of you ended up in the big room or at Autodesk University, or where did you hear about these? I mean, Michaela and I are biased. AU is easy to hear about since we happen to work for the company. So there's, by default, here we are. Thank you so much. But Stephen, Laurie, how did you find the big room? How did you find some of the local communities that you're part of? I'd like to hear a bit more about that.
So the research and the feedback, those have been involved in this for a fairly long time. And probably the reason I was involved in it so early was because I felt I could help drive the product that we all use. And that's opened doors over the years with Inside the Factory and opportunities to actually see people in person in those events. So build those communities over the years. The big room was actually quite funny because I was here last year, or in Las Vegas last year, and I got introduced to the big room there. So that's where I picked it up from. And over the last 12 months, it's been awesome just catching up with people, seeing people, or meeting people, helping people, involved in the fun events as well throughout the big room. And just also seeing people when they've got questions, helping them out, asking them questions. And when I've got a question, feel like I can ask the question in there. There aren't those opportunities elsewhere to ask those silly questions, but the questions you don't feel so comfortable asking elsewhere.
I like that. And I've got some mentorship questions for you both, or all 3 of you here in just a minute. Laurie, how did you find your way into some of these communities?
Well, that's funny that it was at AU for last year for you, because that was me last year. I was hearing the big room, like, what is this? And I went back and I got involved. And it took off from there. And so anybody that'll listen, join the big room. It's educational, but it's also fun. And I think those fun pieces are what helps build the bridge of when you have that hard question or silly question. That's fine. We had a great joke. Hey, I have this other thing I needed to ask you.
This actually tees up my next question for Michaela. What is the big room? We've been talking about it. We've been alluding to it. So tell us, what is it? Obviously, a lot of industry folks are familiar with that term, but it's a little bit different from this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, we'll start with the name, right? The big room. Actually, sitting here in the audience today is lovely Allison Scott, who was the brainstormer of the name of the big room. And we really, thought about what's a construction term that people know about, right? It's a place where you come and you cross-connect with people from all parts of the industry and you share ideas and you ideate on a project, right? And so it's conceptually taking that idea and taking it into a community setting. How do we create a place for people to learn, grow, and connect together? We as Autodesk don't have all the answers. We're never going to have all the answers. But if we can bring our smartest customers together and have them connect on problems, and we can create the space in an authentic way for that to happen, we're doing something right. And so that's really, in its simplest way, it's a place for our customers to come connect with each other, do fun challenges. They get points for challenges. Those points can also be redeemed for cool swag. And, we can also, it's also connected to our learning center. So if you are going and taking courses and learn ACC, that's accumulating points in the big room, and then you can redeem them. So it's just it's a always on fun place for people to connect and learn and grow together at its simplest.
And it really builds into kind of what I want to wrap this up with today, and just mentorship in general.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard to find mentors, and sometimes that might be internal to your own organization. That might be external, somebody that you've met at an event like Autodesk University. And I think digital communities like the Big Room kind of transcend that, where, as Stephen just pointed out a minute ago, like you can kind of float out maybe a little bit of a fluffy question where you're like, okay, maybe I feel a little goofy asking this in person, which you shouldn't, like all questions are valid, but hey, I can throw this out and see what comes back. I'd like to hear about some of your mentors in the past as well. I'm going to throw this one at Michaela first, and I think one of yours might be sitting to my immediate left down there. But
Sure.
Just tell me a little bit more about what you think about mentorship and where those opportunities have come from in your career.
Gosh, that's a great question. Funny enough, taking it back to industry events, right? Like when I've had an opportunity to sit at a round table with other people that are creating events and creating connection points, creating communities, and then asking them, gosh, what did you do to grow your team? What did you do to, get where you are today? And meeting some of those women and then being able to connect with them online, and then being able to then reach back out to them in moments. And then when they connect me to people, it's like, oh, well, that person was, recommended by Laura or someone that I know. And instantly it's this validation of like, cool, I want to talk to that person in my community connected me with, because they're going to probably be awesome people that I can learn and grow from. And so I think that that's what gets me really excited, and also some of the mentors that have come in, through those industry events and then on into continued connection.
I love it. And mentorship is so important, just because, like you mentioned earlier, we don't know all of the things as we march through our careers, and in finding those right people to sit down and connect with and help kind of compel us and push us to the next step, or potentially advise and go, maybe you don't want to do that, because I did it myself and that didn't work out very well, or, variations of all of the above. Stephen, I know some of the local communities you're part of have an element of mentorship. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, so I'll make a plug. And there's in around here today, Women in BIM. So they've got a really great mentoring program. And actually, a mentor part of that is myself. It's an opportunity, again, to give back to a community. Both in the UK and Australia, I know they have really strong mentor programs through the Women in BIM. So if you're looking for a community, that's one of them I highly recommend. Even if you want to be a mentor as well, so outside of the Autodesk space. There's formal mentoring, which we talk about quite often, but there's also the informal mentoring. And again, we're talking about asking questions. And then once you've asked the question, you can reach outside of those questions and does this sound right to you? Is this right? Is this wrong? And that's where a lot of my career been getting a lot of my menteeship from, is that informal space, and just asking my peers around me and colleagues at other companies, is that right? Am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right track here? Yeah.
I do that all the time. I mean, just having that quick sanity check for somebody that you trust, where you go, hey, am I a crazy person right now? Like, does this resonate in the way that I'm anticipating? Has a tremendous value. And I'm always grateful for folks to offer that, whether it's in a really formal way where you go, oh, I consider you my mentor in these very abject ways, or alternatively, like you said, just in kind of that casual. Laurie, I'd be curious to hear, how does that show up in your career as far as the mentorship conversation goes?
Yeah, so we have a very formal process within our company, but informally, I think some of the digital platforms of seeing somebody sharing their videos on LinkedIn or YouTube, or being a really good member in the big room and seeing that. But I think especially sharing the content online. And I don't know that several years ago that I would have known about what the opportunities of a BIM career could be, and finding that community of hearing what other people are doing to build their careers, and how it doesn't matter how big or small your company is, you can still find a way to make a BIM career happen.
I love that because there's a big element of like, oh my gosh, you can do that? Like we're allowed to do, I feel like that every day sitting up here, to be honest. Like, you're all going to give me these microphones. We're going to go do this, but just having folks show you the way and show you what's possible means so much. And I think finding the right mentors who often feel like you and look like you and can offer that perspective and say, okay, no, this isn't just for this group of people. Like you can do this and I can show you this firsthand because, I, as the metaphorical human we're talking about now, have done this in the past. And I just find so much value in that. And I've been grateful for that. Allie, I plugged you a couple times today. You must be sick of me right now. But in the early years of Autodesk, she served that role for me as well, as far as just what is possible. And, we're sitting right here. And I think that's a big outcome from those conversations. And I'll be forever grateful for it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things I think of too is pivotal career steps, right? Where you're in a moment where you don't have all of the knowledge, right? And I had a mentor, I was 23 years old and I was offered my first management position and I was scared to death. I was like, I don't have all the knowledge. And she owned a catering company, was senior in her career, sitting next to me. And she said, listen, you might not have all the knowledge, but whatever you don't know is to the left and right of you. And I've got you, and this person's got you. And I think that's where it comes back to community, right? When we're taking those big leaps of faith, knowing that we don't have all the answers, but we can find the answers because there's people that are out there willing to mentor us, to go along those steps with us. And I think that's such a big part of what community is all about, honestly.
I love that so much. And I think a lot of folks, when they get their first leadership opportunity or their first managerial role in their career, more often than not, they've been an individual contributor for years. They go, okay, I was the best BIM manager. I was, a badass at content marketing or whatever it was. And then suddenly you're leading a group of people who are doing what you used to do, and you're probably not doing that thing anymore. And it's an entirely different set of skills. And if you don't have folks around you to encourage you and help you find your way through that, that's really tough. I remember the first time I had a few direct reports and I didn't show it, but in my head, I'm like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And I'm very grateful for the peers that I had around me who were helpful in saying, okay, this is how you manage this. There's a lot of responsibility in helping other people be successful. And a lot of companies don't offer training to give you those skills. If you're a leader at another company and you don't do this, you should think about this, offering manager and leadership training to your company, because it's a different thing entirely. And I think mentorship plays a huge role in folks being successful there. This is a soapbox for me, so I'm going to stop myself right now, or I'm going to go for the next 20 minutes, but it's an incredibly important concept. So I've got two final questions for y'all today. And Michaela, I think this one is more industry related. So I want to hear what you're hearing in the big room as an observer, but I want to know what trends or tools or technology are y'all fired up about right now? Like, what are you excited about? And what do you think is coming in the next 10 years? Laurie, you want to kick this one off for me? What tech are you just excited about right now?
Well, so since Autodesk for Government got its FedRAMP approval, being able to utilize BIM Collaborate Pro and have our government clients accept that software, huge. So I'm excited to really lead that when I go back to Iowa next week. But also AR and being able to, we are all very familiar and comfortable with the digital space, but that doesn't mean an owner or a client is. And so being able to use either VR or AR to bring that digital space into something more that they are more familiar with, I think is going to be some really neat stuff going forward.
I love both those answers. And as a formal federal proposal manager, I understand the onerous role of, hey, you can only use this very narrow scope of technology, and we're going to be really mean to you if you put this in your proposal and say you're going to do it, which means you're not going to win that proposal. So I didn't tell her to say that, by the way. I had no plugs here. But the AR VR conversation is always so exciting too. I remember the first time I put on a headset, and I wasn't that impressed because it was really early tech. Anybody listening who is skeptical on the value of AR and VR, and you haven't put on a headset in the last 5 to 10 years, go put one on now, because it's an entirely different conversation than it was previously. So I love both those answers. That's great. Stephen, what are you fired up about right now? What do you think's coming in the next 10 years, or you're passionate about using right now?
After the keynote today, it would have to be AI. But actually using it in real cases. So getting project insights out of your projects is something that's been always a struggle, knowing how well you're doing, but also taking that one step further. So safety on site. Safety we know is a major problem. And being able to use AI to extract some of those insights is what I see as being the future, and is what we need to do as an industry. And I'm pretty excited about that. Some of the steps towards that is what I see happening over the next 10 years, or hopefully less than that next year.
And I think we're on our way, there's a lot of hype. The hype train is big around AI right now. And I think we all have to do our due diligence to figure out what actually passes for something that is adding value. I'm thankful that Autodesk has been leading that conversation for quite a while. We've had Construction IQ and a number of other tools that have been doing this before, the venture capitalists went, oh gosh, AI is going to make as much money. Let's talk about it all day long. But the value of augmenting the things that we can do and analyzing things at a scale that a human can't do is tremendous. I'm cautiously optimistic. I see so much of the fluff outside of our industry too, that sometimes I think folks feel like we're beating them on the head with AI. And it's like, no, this is real. Just be smart about how you consider deploying and using it. And I think it's just going to continue escalating in the next few years.
I honestly think that that's where we're seeing conversations in the big room, right? About 6 months, a year ago, it was like, are you thinking about using it? What are you doing it? How are you applying it? Should I apply it? Should I be nervous about it? And I think now we're seeing conversations of, hey, this is how I'm applying it. This is what I'm doing with it. This is how our company's thinking about it. So you've really seen a shift of, hey, it's here and it's really can be helpful and exciting. And so I think that's been something that we've been observing. And it's been really cool to see the conversation start to shift.
Yeah, I've been seeing that as well. And it's neat because you're in a meeting and somebody throws out AI. And so then the question is, okay, well, how do we use that in our day to day? And I mean, AI just as a term is so broad.
So broad.
So yeah, really getting those feedback. I'm like, well, I know this person at this other firm and this is what they're doing and it's working. What do you think about using that here?
Yeah.
Michaela, would you say AI is the answer that you would have thrown out without Steven stealing it from you? Or is there something else that you're bullish about right now?
I think so. I'd also say just kind of pulling actually from one of your last episodes in pre-construction, right? And just seeing like what's happening in terms of the opportunity for it to not just be about scheduling or just be about estimating, but really seeing, these connected workflows come together to say, hey, how are we really thinking about things before we break ground? And you guys can attest to this way more than I can, but really just seeing the advances there and the way it's shaping the conversations around sustainability, around, just how projects are going. I think that's something that I'm really excited about and that these two can speak to way better than I can, but that's something that I'm seeing.
I agree entirely that movement of data and information and the ability to connect the dots and then draw insights from that are, valuable. It's huge. And I'm going to not go down this rabbit hole because I'll talk for another hour, but the data conversation is so important, especially having good data, like making sure you have standards and really thoughtfully implementing how you capture that data. Because if you think about 2, 3, 4, 5 years when you're really leaning on that with tools tied to AI, if your data's not great, your analysis and your insights aren't going to be great either. So there's work to do, but it's an incredibly important moment and opportunity. I love it. All right. So I got one more question for all three of you. If you're avid listeners of Digital Builder, and all of you should be very familiar with this one. What is one tool that you use on every project, no matter what you're working on? Michaela, I'm going to send it to you because you look surprised.
One tool. You're going to not like my answer,
I can't
especially
wait. I can't wait.
Digital Builder. I love my sticky notes. I use them on every project that I work on. And then it eventually goes into my calendar and my team plan and into Asana. But I love a good sticky note. It's a great tool.
Hey, no offense here. I write down all my to-do lists by hand for personal stuff. Work stuff, it's all in a Trello board that I can wiggle around and, make a giant Kanban mess or whatever. But I'll accept the answer. Not everything has to be digital. It's all good. All right, Steven, how about you? What's one tool you can't live without that you bring to every project?
So every project, probably in the last 3 years, has to be model coordination. But I'm actually going to cheat by saying model coordination and design collaboration in partnership together.
All right.
So that's my go-to now. It's replaced our older workflows, and having that issue tracking built into it is a must now. to replace every other software we're using.
I
in this
like
space.
it. You're better in the digital realm. Michaela, she's off in the
I know.
penalty box.
I know. Okay, Post-its. I will. I mean, but honest, and also AI as well. Like it is incredible to think about just the simple listening tools and being able to create action steps. I mean, it's huge, right? And we have an internal tool at Autodesk that we can use. And I asked the other day for a work back schedule, and I was like, I want my finish date on this date and create me a work back schedule. And I just watched it like pump out dates moving backwards, and I was like, whoa, this is cool. So I mean, there is the AI component as well.
All right, you closed the loop. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
Thank you, Laurie. How about you? What's your tool?
I think it's very connected to yours, Stephen. And I couldn't really pinpoint whether it's communication or collaboration, but I don't think you can really have either of them without each other. But there's not a single project where it's just me. I mean, you have the client, you've got the builder, you've got the designer. Within the designer, you have different design teams within your office, whether it's physical or remote. You have to communicate and collaborate with somebody. And having that community ties right into that.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you all three. Usually it's both. I don't usually do a trifecta of guests, so I appreciate all three of you joining me today for this episode of Digital Builder. If you're not familiar, if you haven't figured out what these logos behind me mean, this is Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. We are video first. My friend Dave is over there on that stand filming us right now. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Eric Thomas that works at Autodesk. And until next time, goodbye.